60% for asbestosis is worth $1,435.02 a month. It all hangs on two numbers from one breathing test, and the VA is allowed to skip the number that pays you most. Asbestos isn't on the presumptives list either, so nobody hands you any of this. No automatic link, no burn pit style shortcut. You served on the ship, you breathed what they packed around the steam pipes, and the VA still starts you at zero. So carry one thing with you the whole way through. There's a form. 10 minutes, filed before the actual claim, and on the right day it's worth more than your whole first year of payments. Most veterans have never heard of its number. I'll hand it to you at the end, with the one box that decides the money.
Hey, this is Tiffany, and the number you're fighting over is 6833. Asbestosis. Its own diagnostic code, 38 CFR 4.97. The version going around says exposure gets you an automatic rating. Half true at best. The code is real. The automatic part isn't.
Look at what the stuff actually does. This is Chris, and asbestosis isn't a bruise or a break, it's scarring. You breathe a fiber too small to cough back out. Your lungs wall it off, and the wall is stiff. Stiff lungs don't fill. That's the whole disease in one sentence.
Careful with the word exposure, though. I'm Emma, and by definition, the VA doesn't owe you a rating for exposure. It owes you a rating for a disease that exposure caused. Two different claims, and only one of them gets paid.
Yeah, look what a worker wears to be in the same room as it now. Sealed suit, respirator, air filter. You got a rag and no ventilation. Today we go deeper on asbestosis than we ever have, because the disease is obvious and the paperwork is where people lose.
Two numbers decide it, not the X-ray, not the cough.
FVC and DLCO. One measures how much air you can force out of a full chest. The other measures how much oxygen actually crosses from the lung into the blood. Write both down, because the second one gets left off the report constantly, and it's very often the one that would have paid you more.
Run the order right and you get paid from an earlier date. Run it wrong and you donate a year of your own money to the calendar. Step 1 isn't the claim. Everybody thinks step 1 is the claim.
Which is why I want to answer the biggest question in this topic before we go one step further.
Every veteran who served below decks asks a version of this one everywhere they gather. I did 20 years in engine rooms. Do I get an automatic rating for asbestos like the burn pit guys? No, you don't. And that one word, automatic, is the entire reason this video exists.
And the part nobody warns you about is the year of back pay most veterans hand over for free. But every dollar of it dies right here if you get one thing wrong. And it isn't your lungs, it's the paperwork that says the Navy put you next to it. Service connection. That is where an asbestos claim lives or dies, and it's where these claims most often die. The disease isn't in dispute, the link is.
Wrong assumption number 1. And it's nearly universal. Veterans believe that because the Navy used asbestos everywhere, and because the VA knows the Navy used asbestos everywhere, the exposure gets taken as read. It doesn't. There's no presumption of service connection for asbestos, and there's no presumption of exposure either. Asbestos isn't a PACT Act condition. Nothing about it is automatic.
That's not what people are being told. That is not what people are being told online. Shipboard service alone does not prove exposure. Where does the VA actually say it doesn't?
In the adjudication manual, the asbestos section, it tells the rater to determine whether military records show evidence of asbestos exposure in service, to develop whether there was pre-service or post-service exposure, and then to determine whether there's a relationship between the exposure and the claimed disease. 3 separate findings. If shipboard service settled it, there'd be nothing left to determine.
3 findings, not 1. Then it's busted, and I'll say so on the board.
Take the 3 legs one at a time, because this is the part you can actually work on. Step 1, a current diagnosis, and it has to be asbestosis, not just a shadow on a film. Step 2. Evidence you were around the stuff in service. Step 3. A doctor who'll say in writing that the first one came from the second one. That's the rep. 3 legs, and a stool with 2 legs doesn't stand.
And leg 2 is the one time is quietly eating. Emma, how long does this thing take to show up?
The exact number is a range, and it's a brutal one. 10 to 45 or more years between first exposure and the disease appearing. That's the VA's own figure, not mine. So the man being told today that his lungs are scarred was breathing the fibers when Nixon was in office. Call it what it is. It's a 45-year fuse, and it was lit in a compartment nobody photographed, which means your proof is 40 years old. And the men who could vouch for you are getting old too.
Chris, you've had a question on your face since we started this one. Ask it.
I didn't want to be the one to say it out loud, honestly, but somebody has to. If the VA doesn't presume anything, what evidence actually proves I was exposed 40 years ago? That's the wall. That's the actual wall.
Your job, not your ship. Your job.
Right instinct, and here's the reason it works. The VA's own asbestos guidance names the occupations where exposure was high and disease was common, and insulation work and shipyard work are the 2 it calls out by name. Mining, milling, carpentry and construction, and the manufacture and servicing of friction products are on that list too. So the exposure leg isn't built out of the hull number. It's built out of what you did inside the hull. Boiler tender, machinist's mate, hull technician, pipe fitter, insulator. Anyone tearing lagging off a steam line in a compartment the size of a bathroom.
And walk with me on what that leg is worth, because it isn't abstract. 60% pays $1,435.02. 30% pays $552.47. So the gap is, call it $900 roughly, no, $882.55 a month, times 12. $10,590.60 a year, riding on which of those 2 numbers an examiner writes down.
Name it then. Name the yard, name the dates, name the job, not the ocean, not the decade, the yard.
Which is where a buddy statement stops being a nice to have and turns load-bearing. Your service record shows your rating and your assignments. It won't show that you spent 4 months ripping lagging out of a fire room during an overhaul, because nobody wrote that down. Somebody who was in there with you can, and let me be exact about the standard, because people overwrite these. It doesn't need to be eloquent. It needs to be specific, and it needs to be sworn.
0. That's what exposure with no disease pays. And I'd rather say it than let you read it in a letter. This isn't for you if you're hoping to be paid for what you breathed. You don't qualify without a diagnosis. And plural plaques on their own, with both breathing numbers above 80%, you don't qualify for the 10% tier either. You can be service-connected at 0. Real recognition, no check.
The other one people don't expect is the competing explanation. That same manual tells the rater to develop your pre-service and post-service exposure too. 20 years as a civilian pipe fitter after you got out, and the VA has somewhere else to point. It doesn't kill the claim. It's the thing your nexus letter has to beat.
The fuse was lit in a room nobody photographed. Your job is to describe the room.
Describe the room. Right.
One thing before the next part, and then we move right on. If any of this is clicking, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for the next one. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you would think.
Different animal entirely, this next part. Everything we just said gets you through the door. What happens once you're inside it is arithmetic. The VA rates asbestosis under the general rating formula for interstitial lung disease, covering diagnostic codes 6825 through 6833. Asbestosis is the last one on that list, and every tier in it is written in terms of 2 numbers.
Say them.
FVC and DLCO. Forced vital capacity and diffusion capacity of the lung for carbon monoxide by the single breath method.
FEV1 isn't in there. Anywhere. Not once. Biggest myth in the topic. Veterans study FEV1. They walk into the exam thinking about it. I watched an online summary of this very code hand back FEV1 numbers as if they were the criteria. They're not.
Hold on, that's not a small thing. That's the number a lot of those appeals are built on.
It's not small at all, and the reason is mechanical. FEV1 measures how fast you blow air out, so it's an obstruction number. Right tool for asthma, right tool for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease where the pipes are narrowed. Asbestosis isn't an obstruction, it's a restriction. The pipes are fine, the bellows won't open. So the VA rates it on how much air the bellows holds, which is FVC, and on how much oxygen crosses into the blood, which is DLCO.
And I want you to see the test because most people have never watched it done. This is the maneuver that produces FVC. It looks like nothing. It decides everything. Watch him. Lungs to the top, mouth sealed on the filter, then blow a full 6 seconds without stopping early. 6 seconds is a long time when your lungs are scarred. That effort 3 times over sets your tier.
So if he blows a 78 and 78 sits inside the 10% band, then the rating that comes back is
Hold on, whichever number's worse, or do they add them?
neither. Read the word between them. It's or.
Which is the most valuable word in this scene. 10% is an FVC of 75 to 80% predicted, or a DLCO of 66 to 80. 30% is an FVC of 65 to 74, or a DLCO of 56 to 65. 60% is an FVC of 50 to 64, or a DLCO of 40 to 55. And 100% is an FVC under 50, or a DLCO under 40, or you need outpatient oxygen, or you've developed pulmonary hypertension.
So anything at 80 or under on either number and you're competent.
No, 80 on the nose is 10%, not 60. Above 80 is 0.
0. Okay, noted.
Or, not and. That's a gift.
Say why it's a gift because people are going to skate right past it.
You only have to meet one of them. Picture a veteran whose FVC comes back at 70. On FVC alone, he's a 30% rating. But his DLCO comes back at 52, and 52 sits inside the 40 to 55 band. That band is 60%. He doesn't average them. He doesn't split the difference. The worst number, if the examiner accepts it as the true measure of his disability, carries him to the higher tier.
So, back to where I was going with that 80 line. Here's what it's worth. $552.47 becomes $1,435.02. Same man, same lungs, same day.
And the chest x-ray everybody obsesses over?
Proves you have it. Pays you nothing.
So everything now hangs on the DLCO being run at all. And here's the sentence that should worry you. The regulation gives the examiner permission not to run it.
Permission not to run it. Real sentence, real regulation, and it's costing veterans real money.
4.96, subsection D, paragraph 2. If the DLCO isn't of record, the VA rates you on alternative criteria, one condition attached.
Which is?
The examiner states why the test wouldn't be useful or valid in your particular case. That's the whole guardrail. One sentence, one person.
I want somebody on the line who knows these decisions cold. Professor Duran knows the respiratory schedule cold.
Glad to. So, short answer, yes, it happens. And usually not out of malice. It happens because the clinic running the contract exam is set up for spirometry and isn't always set up for a diffusion study. It's a different machine.
So the test that pays more is the test that's harder to run. Great.
For a restrictive disease like this one, the diffusion number is usually the one that tracks the disability. That's the point of it. It measures the thing asbestosis actually breaks, which is oxygen crossing scarred.
Exactly. And a private pulmonologist can run it in an afternoon. Nobody tells you that either.
Scarred tissue, yes. And that's right, a private study is evidence like any other. The VA does not own the only machine.
But surely if the examiner leaves it out, the rater sends it back, because a missing test means an incomplete exam and the whole file is…
No, it's a complete exam. The reg says alternative criteria, nothing to send back.
Okay, yeah, that's worse.
And if you're half listening to this in the truck, here's the line to keep. Ask for the DLCO by name. I mean, ask before the exam, in writing.
45-year fuse, and they won't spend 20 minutes measuring it. And this complaint turns up in veteran forums constantly in almost identical words. My exam took 11 minutes and they never did the breathing test. Is that normal? It's common, it's not correct, and it's fixable.
So fix it. Already denied? File the 526. Wait, no, I had that backwards. The 526EZ is the initial claim. The 20-0995 is the supplemental. That's the one you want, with a new test in hand. And the new test is the whole supplemental, one diffusion study. That's the rep. That's the breathing number fight right there.
And a private one counts. Let me say that clearly, because people think only the VA's machine is real. A private pulmonologist's diffusion study is evidence. Grain of salt on this, because I'm describing a shape I've seen a lot, not one man's file I've read. It goes like this. Contract exam runs spirometry only. 30% comes back.
Spirometry only, so no diffusion number anywhere in the file.
None. He pays for his own, a couple $100, something like that. Diffusion comes back in the low 50s.
Low 50s. That's inside the 60% band.
It is 40 to 55 is 60%. Supplemental goes in, and the rating moves.
And the rule underneath that shape checks out, which is the part that matters. Alternative criteria are allowed. Better evidence is also allowed.
Push the edge of it. What if the two tests disagree? FVC says 30, diffusion says 60. Who wins?
It depends, and it depends on exactly this. Which test the examiner states most accurately reflects the level of disability. That's the regulation's own language. The examiner's stated judgment is the tie-break.
So the tie-break is an opinion, which makes the opinion a target. You don't argue the number. You give the examiner a reason to pick yours.
And the way you do that, forget the argument. Bring the better test.
I won't put a verdict on anybody's file from a studio, and you should distrust anyone who does. What I can tell you is the shape these decisions keep taking. The diffusion study is missing. The rating gets built on whichever test did get run, and nobody ever circles back to ask for the other one. Thanks for having me. If you take one thing from me today, take this. The missing test is not a dead end, it's an errand. Go and run it.
Professor Duran, thank you. That's the most useful sentence anybody's said today. Everything up to here gets you the right number. What's next is where veterans with the right number still walk away with nothing extra, and they never understand why.
Okay, I have to say it because it's the most expensive thing nobody tells you. A man files for asbestosis. He wins it. His check doesn't move by $1, not $1, and he did everything right.
That's the fork, and it's a real one. Tiffany says don't chase the asbestosis grant for the money. Emma thinks that advice will cost people thousands. Tiffany, you're up.
38 CFR 4.96, subsection A. Respiratory codes will not be combined with each other. Not combined. The regulation's own word. So an asbestosis grant doesn't sit on top of a rating you already carry. There's no stack. The version going around says file everything and watch it add up. Busted.
Almost. And the word she skipped is the word that pays. The same paragraph says a single rating is assigned under the diagnostic code which reflects the predominant disability, with elevation to the next higher evaluation where the severity of the overall disability warrants it. So read what that actually permits. Your asbestosis doesn't add to the other code. It can replace it. I worked this across 2 fresh notebook grids last night, and the whole thing turns on one comparison. Which of your lung problems is the worst one, measured properly?
Emma, put a number on it. At what point does replacing beat leaving it alone?
When your diffusion number is the worst number you own. Asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease get rated on how fast you blow out. Asbestosis gets rated on diffusion. If the oxygen isn't crossing, that's the code that should be flying.
Sure. And now every veteran watching thinks he's got 3 ratings coming, because the internet told him the codes
don't add. I said that. You're arguing with a comment section, not with me.
The comment section is who's watching. That's my whole point, and it's why the framing matters more than the reg does.
Where does elevation actually come from, Emma? Say the source out loud because that's the load-bearing claim in your whole case.
4.96, subsection A, the sentence directly after the one Tiffany read. Elevation to the next higher evaluation where the severity of the overall disability warrants such elevation. Same paragraph she just quoted at me.
Yeah. Okay, that one's real.
Then here's one neither of you has touched. What about the man whose biopsy comes back mesothelioma, not asbestosis?
Different code entirely, and it's the one place the answer is simple. Malignant neoplasms of the respiratory system rate under 6819 at 100%, and it continues past the end of treatment, with a mandatory exam 6 months after treatment stops.
$3,938.58. Don't file that one as asbestosis.
So do the 2 ratings add up to 90% for him? Or does the VA cap him at 60?
Okay, I have to fix the question before I can answer it, because the unit's wrong. Nothing's adding, and nothing's capping. There's no arithmetic happening at all. The real question is which single code describes him, and the answer to that one is 6819, and it's 100%.
And that word, predominant, is doing an enormous amount of work in this episode. So before this video ends, we're putting the whole rule on the board. 4 lines. It's the reason 3 lung conditions can pay exactly what one pays.
And I'll give Tiffany 2 things because she's right about both. If your other respiratory code already rates higher than your diffusion number would, the asbestosis grant won't raise your check this month. That's real, and people should hear it plainly. Second, telling a sick man he has money coming when he doesn't is its own kind of harm. What I'm not giving her is the advice. Don't chase the check, fine. File it anyway. Service connection is a door, and the check is only one of the things behind it.
And that's where I still disagree with you, and I'm going to keep disagreeing.
Landing that for everybody at home. The grant might not raise your check. It always raises your standing.
Standing, fine. I'll take that word. The check, I'm still not promising anybody.
Nobody's asking you to. Here's the verdict, and it isn't the question you came in with. You asked whether asbestosis stacks. It doesn't, and 4.96, subsection A, settles that in one sentence. The question you should be asking is whether asbestosis is your predominant disability. Diffusion your worst number? File it. It can become the code you're rated under and carry you up a tier. Other lung code already rating higher? File it anyway, but file it for the door, not the dollars. And if your biopsy says mesothelioma, none of this applies. That's 6819, 100%. One set of lungs. The VA only rates them once.
Once. That's the whole rule.
Four lines on a board. I promised them, so we're going and getting them. This is the rule that decided the argument you just watched, and it's the most misunderstood paragraph in the whole respiratory schedule.
And it really is 4 lines, genuinely 4.
This is the promise Bella made you in the debate, and it's worth the wait. On the left, what almost every veteran expects. Asbestosis at 30, asthma at 30, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease at 30. 3 conditions, 3 ratings, 1 big combined check at the end of it. On the right, what the regulation actually does. Those codes aren't combined with each other. 1 rating gets assigned, under whichever code reflects the predominant disability. And then, only if the overall severity warrants it, that single rating may be elevated 1 level.
Say the difference in plain English, because I can feel people arguing with that board.
3 diagnoses, 1 check.
Let me put it in a room you've actually stood in. A hotel books you a room, and it charges you for the room. Your lungs are the room. Each lung condition is another guest you walked in with. The rating is the room rate. And the elevation, that 1 step up, is the front desk moving you to a bigger room when the one you booked genuinely can't hold you.
Take the electric meter on your house. Add a lamp, add a freezer, add a space heater. You don't get 3 bills. 1 meter, 1 bill.
So what's the same in both of those, Chris?
You get billed for the thing, not for the list of what's inside it.
And that's the rule. The VA rates the organ, not the diagnosis.
Okay, but walk with me, because I don't think the hotel holds. What's the room rate when 1 guest is quiet and 1 of them is screaming? And there's the catch, isn't it? Unlike a hotel, the VA doesn't average its guests and it doesn't split the bill. It walks the room, finds the loudest one, and charges for that.
Which is why the elevation clause matters so much. Because if all 3 guests are moderately loud, then the overall severity might still...
Stop right there. That's my lane. Here's what it means for a real person on a real Tuesday. Your service connected for asthma at 30%. Your asbestosis diffusion number comes back at 52. You don't get 30 plus 60. You get 60. 1 rating under asbestosis, because that's now the predominant disability. Your check goes from $552.47 to $1,435.02. It didn't add, it replaced. And replacing was worth $882.55 a month.
Okay, that changes my answer. I've been telling people it can raise the rating. You just showed them the money, and that's a different sentence. So in plain terms, with no hotels in it, 38 CFR 4.96, subsection A, the respiratory codes on that board aren't combined with each other. 1 rating, under the predominant disability, with 1 possible step up if the overall severity warrants it. Although, hold on. Why is it even called predominant? Not worst, not highest. Predominant.
Because worst is a feeling, predominant is a finding.
That's better than anything I had. Pass me the printout, actually, because the word is doing real work here. It's the code that reflects the predominant disability. Reflects. It's a judgment about which condition is driving your impairment, and a judgment is something you can put evidence in front of.
Bella, you've had a face on for 2 minutes. Say it.
Reluctantly, because I don't love where it lands. I make my grandmother's chai recipe exactly her way and swap 1 thing and it's a different drink, so I'm biased toward leaving a working thing alone. My question anyway. If it might not add $1, is it worth reopening a claim I already won?
You're right about the risk, and I'm not going to pretend it away. Reopening moves a file that's currently sitting still, and a rating can be reduced on re-examination. True, but you're asking the wrong question. And it's the same wrong question as before. It isn't, is it worth reopening? It's which number is my worst number. If you already know your diffusion is the worst thing you own, you aren't reopening a settled file. You're correcting an unfinished one.
$882.55 a month, every month, for 1 test nobody ran. Bella, you've been holding a form over our heads since the first minute of this video. Pay it off.
The 10-minute form I promised you up top. VA Form 21-0966. The intent to file. And it's the cheapest thing in this entire episode. That's the real one, and I want the top right corner. That empty box is the whole point of the form. It says do not write in this space. Correct, you never touch it. The VA does. The day they stamp it is the day your money starts counting.
By definition, it isn't a claim. That's what people miss. It's a placeholder. You're telling the VA you intend to file, and from that moment you've got 1 full year to actually get the claim in. And the effective date it protects is the date the claim finally lands, which is why you want to move fast and get it in within a few...
Right, so the clock starts when the claim lands. 6 months in, 6 months of pay.
No, and I want to be careful here because I said it badly myself a second ago. The effective date isn't the day the claim lands. It's the day they stamped the intent to file. That's the entire reason the form exists. The claim can land 11 months later and still get paid from the stamp, as long as you already had the condition when you filed. The rule is the stamp, or the date the disability arose, whichever is later.
Say that again slowly, because that's the money.
Then walk one all the way through. Call him Dale Whitaker. Boiler tender, left the Navy in 1978, and his diffusion number comes back at 52, which we now know puts him at 60%. Dale files his intent to file in January, on a Tuesday, in about 10 minutes. Then the medical evidence takes a while. The private diffusion study takes a while. His actual claim doesn't land until December. 11 months later. 11 months of nothing as far as the calendar's concerned. Except it isn't nothing, because the stamp reached back and grabbed all of it.
Run it. $1,435.02 times 11 months.
$15,785.22, paid in one lump for a form that took him 10 minutes on a Tuesday in January. That's the unlock, and I've wanted to hand it to you since the first minute. But the same rule runs in reverse. Skip the form and your back pay starts the day the claim lands. Dale's 11 months would have been worth exactly 0.
And the reason people skip it is, forget the reason. They skip it because nobody tells them it exists.
So let me be honest about the downside, because we've been selling this hard for 20 minutes. The intent to file costs you nothing. The asbestosis claim behind it might. If you already hold a higher respiratory rating, that grant may add $0 this month, and reopening a file exposes it to a re-examination it wasn't going to get. That's a genuine cost, and anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something.
It's still the right call for most of you, though. The door matters more than the dollar, because service connection is what your family stands on if this thing takes you.
But if the word on the biopsy is mesothelioma, throw this whole episode out. 6819, 100%, $3,938.58, which continues past the end of treatment.
With a mandatory re-examination at, 12 months after treatment stops?
6 months after treatment is discontinued.
6. Thank you. Be kind to yourself if you're the one hearing that word this week, and then go file the 10-minute form anyway today, long before your medical evidence is anywhere near ready. And if you know a Navy man who worked below decks, send him this one. 210966. It's 10 minutes of his life, and it could be $15,000 of his back pay.
Step 1. 210966. Write it on your hand if you have to.
I've already printed it. It's on the fridge. It's laminated.
Of course it is.
Okay, that was good. Here's the one rule to carry out of this room, though. Form 210966 today before the evidence. The stamp is the money.
One thing you're walking out with. Go.
The test that pays you is the one they're allowed to skip. Ask for the diffusion study by name, in writing, before your exam, and you've already done more for your own claim than most veterans ever will.
1 rating under the predominant disability. That's the sentence. And next time we're getting into what happens when the VA proposes to cut a rating you already have in the letter that gives you 60 days to stop it.
Tonight, before you sleep, pull up your last pulmonary function report and read your numbers off it. If the letters DLCO aren't on the page, that test was never run on you, and that one missing line is worth $882.55 a month.
And for the man whose asthma already rates higher than his lungs would under asbestosis, I still say don't file it expecting a check. File it for the door. My answer hasn't moved.
If this took something confusing and made it plain, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next veteran who searches asbestosis at 2 in the morning finds this video because you did. That's the only reason this series keeps growing. And here's the one only you can answer. Pull your report. Was the DLCO ever run on you, or did they rate your lungs on half the evidence? Put it below because I genuinely want to see the ratio. Take care of those lungs, be kind to yourself this week, and I'll see you on the next one. This is Bella signing off for Erica.